Hey everybody, Mr. S here, and today I want to talk about the Imperial Measuring System. Now I know what you're thinking. Why? Although the empirical system is the older system, it's still accurate and it's very much used today. So when it comes to buying or selling lumber, you can get a 2 by 4 by 8 foot, for instance, which is really a 2 inch by 4 inch by 8 feet. And there are 12 inches per foot, and you need to know that. So what about the transportation technology? Do we use the empirical or the customary measuring system for cars and trucks? Yes, we do, kind of. We also use a lot of the metric system too, but for instance, on my own personal car, we do have 15-inch tires. And they are inflated to 30 to 35 psi, which stands for pounds per square inch. And you need to know that. With regards to underneath the hood, the air conditioning system will take roughly about a 0.9 or even a pound of refrigerant in order to operate properly. You can't put more, you can't put less in there, or else it won't operate correctly. When traveling in the United States, they still post their speed limits in terms of miles per hour. Also, when you purchase gas, it's in gallons. The empirical system came about in England in the early 20th century. Now, at that time, the king wanted a unit of measuring system to buy, sell, and trade at market. But he also wanted to have something on him that he could use to measure with. So that's where he got the idea of the thumb, or the inch. The inch was, in fact, the width of the king's thumb. Guess where the foot came from? So, everything was fine, well, and good until the king died. Then the new king had a new inch and a new foot. Well, at some point, every time the king died, a new king would take place. Well, they had to standardize it so that everyone could actually use it, and it was more reliable and also accurate. Now, if you could count to 16, there are 3 and only 3 rules you need to remember in order to do the empirical measuring system. Once you know these 3 rules, you'll be free to measure anything using this system. Rule number 1. Know your inch scale. Well, okay, what does that mean? Now let's take a close-up of an inch to see how it is divided. If I draw a line right here in the center, I've now split this inch into 2 equal parts. Well, therefore, I've now made this a half-inch scale. Now, we could divide it down even more. So let me draw a line right here. And I'm going to draw another line right here. So now there are 4 equal parts to this inch. So I've now made this a 1/4 inch scale. That also means that since there are 4 equal parts to this inch, the number 4 will be in the denominator of the fraction. Let's count the segments of an inch of this particular ruler. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Since there are 8 segments per inch, 8 is the denominator of this fraction. This will be a 1/8 inch scale. If you look at this ruler, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 segments within every inch of this ruler. That means 16 will be in the denominator of every fraction we get because we're using this ruler to measure with. Now, most rulers and measuring tapes will come in the 16th inch scale because it's pretty accurate. This, however, is a ruler that belongs to our millwright. So there are 64 segments per inch on this particular ruler, which is incredibly precise. But don't worry about that. Let's just stick with the 16th inch scale. Okay, so rule 1, know your inch scale. Rule 2, count the spaces, not the lines. Well, what does that mean? Now, if we look at this ruler, we can see that this is a 16th inch scale, which means that 16 will be the denominator of every fraction that we get. Now I want to know the distance between this 0 and where this arrow is pointing. So I'm going to count the spaces. The spaces will represent the numerator. So I got space 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 spaces, so I have 4 over 16. So this arrow represents 4/16 of an inch. Now, let's try this second arrow instead. We already know that the denominator is going to be 16, but I know that there's a full 16 spots before I hit this 1. And notice how this arrow is pointing to the one spot where there's actually an empty spot. So it's actually, I know for sure that represents 15 spaces because 16 minus 1 equals 15. So this second arrow is 15/16 of an inch. Now let's look at this third arrow. Here we are past the 1 inch mark, which means that there will be a 1 in front of the fraction that has a denominator of 16. So now let's count the spaces from the 1 position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have got 8 spaces. So I now know I've got 1 and 8/16 spaces. Okay, so know your inch scale of the ruler or the tape measure that you're using. Count the spaces, not the lines. And your third and final rule, reduce to its simplest form. I know that 16 will be the denominator for this inch scale. So let's now count the spaces for the first arrow. Space 1, 2. So I have 2 out of 16 inches, which represents the distance from 0 to that point where the arrow is pointing. So 2 over 16, if I kept dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2, would actually be 1/8 of an inch. Now, let's go to the second arrow. Automatically, I know this second arrow is pointing to the 1/2 inch mark. First of all, there are 8 spaces going to this big line in the center. So 8 over 16 is equal to 1/2 an inch. But notice also that this big line tells me that that's the midway point, and that there's a kind of a bigger line here too, and a bigger line here, but not as big as this one. So that's actually my 1/4 inch line, and that's my 3/4 inch line with that my 1/2 inch line. These lines are actually there to help us reduce our fractions to the simplest form. If the numerator is an even number, just keep dividing by 2 until you get an odd number in the numerator. Then you can't reduce it anymore. So, what are the things I want you to remember? The imperial measuring system is still very much used today, and there are only 3 rules. Know your inch scale, count the spaces, and reduce. I hope this has empowered you to do more, because the more you know, the better it is. Till next time, stay healthy.